Good morning. My name's Dave McCann, and it's a pleasure to be speaking to you at reInvent 2020. In the next session, I'm going to be discussing the experiences that we've seen from a number of our large customers in their transforming key business applications, migrating a substantial portion of their application portfolio to the AWS cloud, and then the approach they've taken to governance and operations of their application portfolio that is running on the cloud. Later in the talk, I'll be meeting with Paul von Ottenried, the CIO of Bristol Myers Squibb, a major US corporation who are doing pharmaceutical delivery worldwide. Let's talk about the evolution and modernization of the application portfolio. Today, companies are evolving faster than ever before, and they're having to do so for multiple reasons. At one level, there are billions of consumers now around the world on smartphones whose interaction with their institutions is done over a phone. There are millions of software developers more than ever before who are innovating on behalf of corporations and suppliers, transforming the customer experience, the supply chain, and taxpayer for government. And in addition, AWS is introducing disruptive cloud technologies that are changing the economics and the innovation opportunity for companies around the world. And as a result, companies are developing applications in new ways faster than ever before. Now, those drivers translate into corporations and governments in different ways. And as we've studied over 1,000 migration projects around the world, today we're going to be discussing about how these innovations are considered. At the application portfolio level, the CIO has a broad portfolio of applications, and let's say we're seeing on average over 1,000 applications in a large enterprise. In a mid-sized company or organization, that could be 300 to 400 applications, and in a small business, it might be 50 to 100 applications. But there's a portfolio of applications that have been built up over the years, some of which are very new, some of which are a little older. And the CIO is assessing with the head of their organization which particular applications need to be modernized first, which ones need to be completely rewritten, and very often the priority is over customer experience or supply chain. While the CIO is looking at the application portfolio, the CISO of the organization is looking at the security posture. And as the applications are modernized, there's a lot of change going on around network, endpoint, and threat detection. The head of infrastructure and operations, used to running resources on-premise, now has a set of resources running in the cloud, and there are over a dozen domains that are up for refresh across storage and network and security, and we'll talk about that later. And then an entity has a VP of Big Data who is looking at databases, analytics, visualization, and the tool refresh possibilities in the journey to cloud. And all four of these waves of change are being considered by companies simultaneously. Now, as this process goes on, the development methodology is also changing to modern tools, to an agile methodology approach, and this involves small teams, continuous innovation, and this results in a velocity of change applied to applications more than ever before. And this is causing both the opportunity for automation and a change in the operating model that many companies have. At Amazon, for example, we deliver over 15,000 changes a day, and compare that to the old days when perhaps only one change was applied to an application a month. And so this change in velocity of development requires a change in tooling and a change in approach. Now, many companies are well into this journey, and we're going to be talking about learnings that we are observing from leaders around the world. Let's start with $11 billion Aon Insurance, who are a global reinsurer headquartered in both the UK and the US, and with development centres around the world. And I recently had the pleasure of talking with Rajiv Khanna, the CTO of Aon. Rajiv would talk about the most impactful thing being about moving to the cloud, that they've been able to cut their ideation time from concept to an application by half. And that ideation time reduction means that they're able to introduce new applications far faster that can benefit their customer experience and how their financial advisors provide advice to their tens of thousands of customers around the world in over 120 countries. They've also completely modernized their data analytics and big data strategy, and are leveraging AWS Redshift to analyze volumes of data far faster than ever before. Now, in another sector, which is government, a good example of a customer well along this journey is the US Navy. And they have a major supply chain system set up, and they've actually moved 72,000 users with multiple instances of SAP onto the AWS cloud. And there they've been able to leverage the compute power and compute scalability of AWS to reduce some of their compute workloads by up to 80%. And they've moved hundreds of applications onto the cloud. So taking that as a start of the learnings that we're seeing, we actually did a study with IDC, and we've done an internal study in over 1,000 migrations. And the common pattern that we can see that companies can yield is, on average, a infrastructure savings of over 31%. In addition, a reduction in security incidents on their application portfolio, and an increase in staff productivity of over 62%, and a velocity of innovation where changes applied to the application portfolio are up by over 3 times. And these are tremendous changes in productivity that are made possible. Let's talk a little more detail about how customers are making that happen. So let's click down a little on lessons that we've actually learned from a number of customers who have been successful in the migration and modernization of those applications. There are 3 particular lessons that we are going to give you feedback on in this talk today. The first one is going to focus on how we approach the planning of your application portfolio and the classification of which applications to be given which treatment. The second pillar of learning that we want to discuss is the building of a governance framework and an operating model for the applications that are running on AWS. And the third pillar of learning that we want to bring you is insight across a number of the case studies we'll quote today, where a key learning is to work with a consulting partner, either AWS Professional Services or one of our many partners worldwide. So let's start by clicking down further on the application portfolio planning. As we work with customers today to modernize their application portfolio, the starting state that we're seeing as a common pattern is that in this application portfolio of 1,000 applications for a large enterprise or 500 for a mid-market organization, is that most applications are still in a server-based architecture running on-premise. There are a number of applications that we're noticing are now modernized on some form of containers. And then many companies have a small number of applications that have moved to a software as a service delivery model, but today that ratio of the portfolio is perhaps at 5%. This is the starting state that CIOs begin with. Now, the choices are many to move onto AWS, and some of those choices that customers have to consider are whether to bring this application over in its existing server-based approach, whether to refactor and modernize that application onto a container-based model, or to actually rewrite the application and leverage some of the power and capability of a Lambda serverless model in order to give them less operating burden and ability to focus on code execution, or to increase the ratio of software as a service. And in AWS Marketplace, for example, today we have over 800 software as a service providers available and operating on our API for provisioning and entitling into your AWS accounts. So this is the kind of journey that many of our customers are now going through. Now, in planning the application portfolio, there are some key observations that we've looked at recently as we've analysed these 1,000 migration projects worldwide. A first learning is that 15 to 20%, sometimes as low as 10%, but 15 to 20% of your applications are probably going to be retired. These applications are old, they're out of date, and in some cases, as you build a new application, you're just going to retire that application and the operating costs will go away. And you have to think about that dimension of your portfolio. We also recently talked to our customer advisory board where the intention of many companies is to move 20 to 30% of the application portfolio out to a software as a service provider. Companies have already started using solutions like Salesforce or Workday, and so they're moving to a confident model of software as a service. So if you're retiring 10%, moving to 20 to 30% SaaS, What do you do with the remaining 60% of your portfolio? There, the decisioning is lift and shift, modernization, or to prioritize the complete rewrite and transformation of a few critical business processes. And that's kind of the model that we are seeing prevalent around the world. Now, we started out doing migrations as a professional services practice with customers in 2015 in the northeast of the US. We built a global migration practice. We've now partnered with hundreds of consulting firms. And really in 2020, we have a proven, repeatable methodology. There's an assessment phase, there is what we call a mobilization phase, and there's a migration and modernization phase. And now that we've done this many times and we've observed and learned from the experience, we're going to be clicking into what that means. But we've got a pretty proven methodology that gives us confidence now that customers can do this in as little as 6 months, or they can take it over a longer period of time. One of the key learnings that we've got is that post-assessment, you want to move quickly into the action of early migration. And there, what we're doing in the mobilization phase is focusing on getting teams at the customer to quickly commence the migration of up to 10 applications. And we're also focusing on the automation of what we call a landing zone. And we used to do that on a custom basis, but we've now productized that into a service called AWS Control Tower. And just recently, we rolled Control Tower out to 5 more regions around the world, where a secure landing zone can be established in as little as a couple of days or at least a week. And then on top of that landing zone, you migrate and modernize applications. So this is a proven journey. It's more repeatable and easier than it ever has been before. And one of the reasons that makes it easier is that the tool set that is available to you today is far richer than it's ever been, and frankly, globally available. In the assessment phase, we bought 2 companies at the end of 2018. We bought a company in Canada called TSO Logic, and we bought a company in Israel called Cloud Endure. We've now turned TSO Logic into a new service called Migration Evaluator. We've made that globally available this year. And Migration Evaluator is a site experience where customers can do an initial directional assessment of the business case to migrate an application, let's say from Windows Server onto AWS. We've also rolled out Migration Hub into multiple regions in Asia Pacific, EMEA, and the US. And Migration Hub is where you can plan and control the migration of the application. And in the mobilization phase, we've done a lot of work on AWS Control Tower. We've recently integrated it with 20 third-party vendors. And with Control Tower, you can set up a very powerful multi-account model for governance of your resources, governance of who has access to what accounts, and the use of Control Tower and Service Catalog accelerates the migration project. And on the migration side of the move, we can now enable you to use Cloud Endure. We have a Cloud Endure migration factory, and we also have a set of software partners. We have over 19 software tool partners that we've established work really well in enabling you to get the application migrated onto the AWS cloud. So tools and methodology are making this a very predictable and easy process. Now, as we do that, we've also observed that in some industries, while customers can move the entire portfolio in 7 months, a number of customers are telling us that given the size of their portfolio, particularly in financial services, pharmaceutical, public sector, and perhaps oil and gas, the application portfolio is actually measured in thousands of applications, and some customers anticipate being in an on-premises and AWS cloud model for perhaps 2 or 3 years. And across AWS in its entirety, you're seeing us respond to that with a series of service responses that give the customer the ability to have a common environment model, whether on-premise or on AWS. Recent examples of that would be VMware on AWS, where we launched with VMware the ability for you to bring the familiarity of your teams and your tools to running VMware on AWS. A second example of that would be that we launched AWS Outposts, which is an AWS appliance that can be right in your data center and has a number of AWS services locally controlled down on your network, but connected into the AWS network. And we've even taken our managed database service RDS and put it down on top of VMware. Now, just this week, Andy has announced 2 days ago EKS Anywhere and ECS Anywhere. And this is a further motion that we've responded to customers who want to be using our container experience on AWS and want to have that same container experience in an on-premise deployed model. And a couple of weeks ago, we announced with IBM Red Hat the availability of Red Hat OpenShift on AWS, ROSA, such that if you're using an OpenShift environment, you can experience the OpenShift environment both on-premise and on AWS. Now, we've not only done this at the compute and development environment level, but at the storage and data movement level, we've been innovating further with our Snowball appliances. And while we sent out Snowball appliances to move data up onto AWS, we're actually finding that many customers keep a Snowball appliance on-prem to have that same AWS experience on-prem as well on AWS. And on the management side of the house, you're going to hear us make continued announcements about AWS Systems Manager being able to apply management to instance resources, not only on AWS, but on-premise. And that's been an evolution of our systems management tool. These all make it easier for you to migrate your applications and reskill your teams as they move to the cloud. And another good example of this in a regulated industry and a customer using these kind of approaches is Sallie Mae. Sallie Mae is a US financial institution. They service a consumer whose persona is that of student, and they originate loans for students going to university. And Sallie Mae wanted to reduce their data center costs, spend more of their resources on application development, and contracted with a service called AWS Managed Services in order to be able to quickly migrate a set of applications onto the AWS cloud. Now, in so doing, they've migrated 71 applications up onto AWS, and AMS has taken over the automation of the patch management of their server fleet, and that patch management has caused a 30% efficiency in their operating velocity, and it's allowed them to innovate faster applications that service their student consumer. So this is an example of how this is playing out. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is move on to the next pillar of our learning, which is around the operating model that we want you as a customer to establish in order for you to manage your applications well and also to accomplish cost efficiency to free up more resources to focus on application development. And in accomplishing that, what are the tools that we provide and what are the tools that our third-party partners provide that we can recommend? Now, last year at reInvent, I gave a talk with Tristan Baker, who's a chief architect at Intuit. And Intuit are a major software vendor in the US who provide multiple packages to both taxpayer consumers and small businesses. And they've moved hundreds of applications onto AWS. And his observation last year was that in order to have great confidence on migrating all the applications, they had established with our team a service management framework, including tools like AWS Config, CloudFormation, and Service Catalog, in conjunction with other third-party tools. And they've been pretty early and fast on the migration of their portfolio. We've since taken a further look at that learning, and we're seeing this across a number of our customers. So as we've studied 1,000 migrations worldwide, there are a number of IT domains that you're already established in your organization. And we've seen that, in particular, 5 or 6 domains require a refresh of tooling, some standardization of decisions. What are those? The first one are your OS environments and your patch management approach. And whether you're standardizing on a mix of Linux, Windows Server, or Red Hat OSs, that whole OS standardization and patch management approach can yield tremendous efficiency. A separate team will very often look at security, identity, and network as it's modernized, and that will cause opportunities for both cost rationalization and increase your ability to handle the velocity of a CI/CD model. Storage and databases become another domain of consideration, and we'll talk about all your choices there. And then monitoring, observability, control mechanisms, those all become very relevant in how they get modernized as you move to the cloud. And as you modernize all of these domains, staff have to be retrained, new skills have to be acquired, old skills have to be lost. And we're working hard to enable all of this to be made possible so that you can go faster, spend less money and time on operations. Now, as you do that, We've built out our own management and governance portfolio, and in 2018 we changed the console to management and governance as a title area of the console. And we continue to innovate with new services in our console to solve for your operational requirements. AWS Control Tower and organizations become central mechanisms that we want you to be using in a multi-account environment where you will have dev accounts, test accounts, and prod accounts, foundation accounts, audit accounts, and we want you to have an account model that works well for distributed teams in a small team environment. We also want to give you the capabilities for laying in governance and compliance controls using things like Service Catalog, and for provisioning and automation with CloudFormation and Marketplace provisioning third-party software, and lay in tools like CloudWatch and CloudTrail, along with third-party tools for observability, and ultimately to have operations controls, both in terms of instantiating and running resources, and spend management controls and visibility tools over budgets and resources. So we are innovating on all of these tools that we want you to use, and as you migrate and modernize, this becomes a collection of tools that accomplish your operating efficiency. Now, we've learned in the last year that customers want more and more prescriptive guidance. And the way we deliver prescriptive guidance to customers is through our well-architected frameworks. Our well-architected frameworks are a program designed and delivered by a solution architecture organization in conjunction with professional services, where we give you prescriptive guides, web pages, documentation, prototype code, and I'm pleased to announce today well-architected management and governance lens. This is a particular prescriptive set of guidance around management and governance of your application portfolio. We've looked at best practices that we've seen in these migrations around the world. We've documented integrations to 20 third-party vendors, including vendors like ServiceNow, Atlassian, and many others. And we have snippets of code and connectors to these tools to compress the time that it requires you to set up a highly efficient operating model for your teams. What we learned with Tristan last year at Intuit was that Intuit stood up what they call their own service management framework. And what we now see is that every customer has their own private mix of tools that that customer wants to use, with services from AWS laid out for different IT functions, whether it's the CIO looking at the portfolio, whether it's the Cloud Center of Excellence managing resources and infrastructure as code, whether it's the monitoring or operation tools embedded into your DevOps pipelines, or whether it's IT, finance, and procurement looking at spend management on all your assets. Every customer is building their own service management framework, and in the well-architected lens, we're going to become far more prescriptive to shorten the time for you to make those decisions and stand up a framework. And as we do that, we're working with over 130 management and governance partners around the world. We've expanded that portfolio, and we're working constantly with these ISVs to guide them on which APIs to integrate with and which products best interoperate with which products. And we work with these partners in many dimensions, including the AWS partner organization, with the Marketplace organization, and over 70 of these vendors have products in Marketplace where you can automate the contracting and provisioning. All of this results in you being able to modernize your software that becomes part of your operating model. And what we've noticed during the migrations is that software is getting modernized across 4 decisioning centers. Just in the same way that customers are looking at modernizing the application and security, vendors are being selected as best in class for that cloud journey. And this modernization is happening in 4 different buying centers. And procurement, legal, and IT finance are also adopting their processes so that they can go faster and allow you to innovate more quickly. And as we do that, Marketplace is our service for provisioning all of that software into your multiple accounts. And I'm pleased to announce today that we're releasing 4 more capabilities on top of Marketplace, including the support for private Marketplace APIs, professional services as a new offering type in the Marketplace, and an integration on Marketplace with AWS License Manager that we call Managed Entitlements. We're also publishing into Marketplace 200 new vendors to expand the selection that you have so that you can bring the appropriate vendor, modernize the contract, and attach that software to your running resources in the appropriate account. This is all simplifying modernization. Now, third-party software, homegrown software, infrastructure as code gets packaged up ultimately into a running application. And I'm pleased to announce today that in making it easy for you to manage applications, we're launching a new capability in AWS Service Catalog called AWS Service Catalog App Registry. Now, an app registry is a central hub for declaring your application resources. And we've always enabled you to manage your resources. Now what we're giving you the ability is to declare and register and associate all resources to an application. And that application now is in the Service Catalog API. And we are allowing you, the customer, and third parties to be able to register and manage all the resources associated with an application. This is going to increase observability, it's going to simplify management and governance, and it becomes a connecting point for many third-party ISVs that you're already using in your service management framework. And we've already started the work of working with leading software vendors, and I'm pleased to say that we've been working with 6 particular vendors early on in the integration to AWS Service Catalog App Registry. So companies such as New Relic and AppDynamics in the monitoring and performance space, Splunk on the SIEM space, Apptio in spend management, Cutover in the compliance reporting for banking space, and CloudTamer also in the spend management space. These vendors are already integrating into this API, and we anticipate working with all 130 vendors in the management and governance portfolio. This reduces your risk and increases the interoperability that you can accomplish. Now, we're also going to have other AWS services work with App Registry. And I'm pleased to pre-announce today that in the coming weeks, AWS Systems Manager is going to release a new capability called Application Manager. Application Manager is a new module of Systems Manager which is able to discover and be aware of all the resources that connect an application. And Systems Manager will both query and refer to App Registry on Service Catalog and use that association rule to give you the ability to apply Systems Manager verbs and actions to your application resources. There are over 100 functional actions that can be performed with Systems Manager, and you, the customer, can also extend Systems Manager, as can partners. So we're increasing the automation surface of Systems Manager and App Registry to all the resources that can be described using CloudFormation JSON. Again, reducing your cost of operations and allowing you to move at a faster pace. Let's turn to a customer that is well down the journey of automating management of applications. We started working with BP, British Petroleum in the UK, back as early as 2014. I remember actually first meeting with them in 2015. BP were one of the first companies in the world to implement a landing zone, working with one of our top consulting partners, UK-based CloudReach. And in building out their landing zone, they've now moved to a point where they've migrated over 1,800 applications onto the AWS cloud. They've integrated dozens of instances of their SAP implementation, and it has made substantial impact on both the operational efficiency of their applications, and they've actually moved the resource consumption model to be variable on many of their application workloads, moving from a fixed cost model to a much more flexible variable cost model, giving them both agility and cost efficiency as they migrate their application portfolio to the cloud. And this was one of the first companies in the world that made that move. So this is the importance of a cloud operating model. And I next now actually want to introduce Paul von Ottenried from Bristol Myers Squibb in a conversation I had a couple of weeks ago to discuss the learning from another major customer in the pharmaceutical industry. Today, I'm delighted to say that I have with me Paul von Ottenried, CIO of Bristol Myers Squibb. And as many of you probably know, Bristol Myers Squibb are a global pharmaceutical leader with thousands of employees around the world developing innovative medicines for people with serious diseases. And I'll let Paul speak more about what BMS does. At AWS, we always learn from our customers. And Bristol Myers Squibb have been through a pretty amazing journey over the last several years, moving and modernizing a set of applications onto the AWS cloud, accomplishing both business agility and cost savings. And so we're here today to discuss transformation, modernization, and governance of the application portfolio, and to learn some of the great lessons that Paul, as a practitioner, can bring to other AWS customers around the world, and to discuss where he thinks he's going to be taking BMS next. So, Paul, good morning.
Dave, good morning. Great to see you again, and really delighted to have the chance to share the story of our company's digital journey with the clouds. This is a journey that's enabled us to fully leverage the rapid cycles of innovation that we are seeing across the technology industry for the last 5 to 10 years. And our progress is especially gratifying when we're placed in the context of our company's mission, advancing science and transforming the lives of patients fighting serious diseases.
So, Paul, AWS has been working with you for many years. I've had the privilege of meeting you now several times, and I've learned a lot every time I talk to you. At AWS right now, we're talking a lot about transformation. And transformation is a word that a lot of people use. It kind of means dramatic change. We tend to think of dramatic change of a business process. And then in using the disruptive capabilities of the AWS cloud, we believe that we can help companies like yourselves transform a business process, modernize your applications. Talk about how you built a transformation agenda at BMS and what the drivers were and what you decided to transform and modernize at BMS.
Dave, our transition into the cloud felt a bit more like a evolution than a revolution. And really, it started 15 years ago, before I think any of us were using the term cloud. We recognized that our industry and our company needed to have increasingly reliant digital capabilities. And we knew that those digital capabilities are only as good as the infrastructure upon which they rely. So we recognized that infrastructure benefits from scale. And our mindset, already starting in 2005, was to find ways to leverage external infrastructure instead of building and maintaining our own bespoke infrastructure. The service provider relationships we started at the time were built on this concept of relying upon their infrastructure instead of having them manage ours. So by 2010, we were already using AWS services for compute and storage, primarily in drug discovery and development areas. The business driver at the time was the need for massive amounts of compute for short and unpredictable bursts of time. And frankly, the cloud was perfect for that. By 2012, we had already adopted a cloud-first principle. And this cloud-first principle was an accelerant in the use of single global instances of core systems for our company, like ERP, CRM, and HR. But the real accelerant to move most of our core compute and storage assets from on-premise to cloud was a company-level decision made in 2016 to close a large campus that happened to include our primary main global data center. So speed of exit was the top priority, and we used a lift and shift model. The thought of re-architecting the applications is ongoing, but we knew that would happen after the lift and shift. Our work there involved moving thousands of servers over a period of several months, and we had to do that with zero business disruption. But probably the milestone that I am most proud of in our journey to the cloud just really occurred in early part of this year, when we migrated our large global instance of SAP and HANA into the AWS public cloud. This is a large system for us, thousands of concurrent users and interfaces, all relying on a single in-memory multi-terabyte database. And I would say with that moment, we pretty much said we're all fully reliant upon cloud services.
So, Paul, tell me some of the business results that Bristol Myers Squibb has been able to achieve from the transformation of your application portfolio as you've both modernized and moved to cloud.
You know, Dave, we've been operating predominantly cloud-based infrastructure for so long, it's almost a bit hard to imagine operating without it. And I should clarify that, you know, the phrase cloud-based infrastructure for me is all forms of cloud: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and even BPaaS, business process as a service, as we say. So, you know, as you know, the true business benefits require more than just using cloud services. They do require changes to information flows, technology architecture, business process. But for us, we've seen benefits in a number of different ways over the years. First of all, our scientists working in drug discovery and development they've been at the forefront of peak demands of compute capacity. Things like molecular modeling and genomics, clinical pharmacology, and proteomics. These are the things that need access and ability to analyze large volumes of data. We would get requests for compute clusters of 2,500 cores, but they only need it for a couple of minutes. So the elasticity of cloud-based infrastructure enables them to do this. Beyond that initial, and I might dare say almost obvious benefit, is that the healthcare industry itself has reached a tipping point in the adoption of electronic health and medical records. This is the world's corpus knowledge about disease, treatments, and outcomes, and it's becoming pervasively digital, which is exploding the size, depth, and complexity of data that we have access to. So cloud-based infrastructure has enabled us to ingest this type of data, often thought of as real-world healthcare data, and rapidly put it in the hands of our researchers. Beyond that, in the last 10 years, our company has seen a significant amount of acquisitions and divestiture activities. Having a cloud-based infrastructure has enabled us greater agility in the execution of those business development transactions. And maybe the fourth benefit, just top of mind here in 2020, is that with the unplanned arrival of SARS-CoV-2 pandemic and the very sudden shift of our global workforce to remote working, our predominantly cloud-based infrastructure enabled a relatively smooth transition. There has been significant progress in our ability to continue to deliver life-saving medicines for clinical trials and for continuing care to patients all around the world. If I had to summarize all these benefits in a simple phrase, it's speed of execution.
Paul, thank you for that. That's an impressive synopsis of payback. And, ultimately, Andy says we want all of our customers to be able to innovate like a startup and yet at the same time operate at scale. And I think some of the benefits you summarised there really show the dimensionality of how you can go faster with development teams, with science teams, and yet you're scaling out many, many applications on the AWS cloud in many different ways with the Cloud Centre of Excellence team. So thank you for that feedback.
Sure.
It's interesting that a lot of our customers talk about the transformation of the application portfolio. And some customers have said that up to 30 to 40% of their applications are actually becoming software as a service. And as the operator of AWS Marketplace, we have almost now 1,000 software as a service vendors that are in Marketplace that can be provisioned, where essentially you're externalizing your infrastructure because you're consuming the resources of the compute or from the software as a service provider. While you're modernizing your application portfolio, whether you're using SaaS or whether you're writing serverless with your own developers, a top concern we do hear from customers is you still have to control cost and you want to optimize for cost. How have you approached the whole topic of cost management as you transform that application portfolio to your point, a mix of serverless and SaaS? And how has cost efficiency impacted the organization?
You know, we are perpetually focused on cost, not just the initial one-time costs of building or enhancing an application, but even more concerned with the ongoing maintenance of that digital capability, the hosting and the support, what we sometimes call run costs. I've seen countless spreadsheets attempting to accurately compare the cost of on-premises hosted infrastructure with cloud and colo models. My perspective is this: almost all those analyses that I've seen overlook the most difficult cost to measure, which is the cost of having our employees focused on infrastructure concerns instead of focused on helping our scientists discover a transformative medicine. Now, with respect to specifically managing and optimizing our use of the cloud and our cloud costs, our approach has been to fully leverage all of the tools and go big on automation and standards. But by doing that, it's helped us create an efficient and what I'd refer to as a fast spin-up model of infrastructure components. This is quite a contrast to the days of provisioning our own infrastructure in our own data centers, which sometimes felt like each server was a unique work of art. In the cloud, it's a bit of a greenfield opportunity to pour a better foundation, and it's really only possible because of a strong central cloud team. There are many benefits from standardization that a central cloud team provides, but among them, speed, supportability, reliability, and scalability.
I'm glad you brought up this issue, because to me, cost also translates also into ongoing what we call management and governance. And in the ongoing management and governance of resource, one way to reduce costs and be more efficient is automation. And I know that your cloud engineering team have worked diligently with us around using one of my service lines, which is Service Catalog, in the automation and provisioning of resources out to your teams. And we're never the only tool. We clearly integrate with the serverless tools that you use, our Lambda service. We integrate with AWS Config and other management tools. As you've built out this operating efficiency, this cloud flexibility, AWS, how do you think about the primary tools that you want to have to automate that management framework? I'm conscious you use a couple of other vendors in conjunction with us. We think of this as something that we call a service management framework. And our view is we want to offer you the best tools, but we also work with some of the world's best software vendors. What other tools might you be using in your service management framework?
Yeah, so in our world, if you're, for example, a data scientist, you care the most about the time from your first query to start your project. When we're bringing about a new system, we care about the time to be live, to go live for customers. If you're a commercial application team bringing forth web solutions for patients and doctors, you care about how fast the internet-facing solution can iterate. And none of those are factors that should really be worried about in the heavy lifting and undifferentiated work of managing servers. So what we try to do is deliver a capability that enables them to have the environments they need relatively fast. So serverless solutions, for example, has been a major focus for us. We've prepackaged governance kits to help teams simplify their journey through serverless and keep them up to date. And in the era of software as a service applications, serverless kits help our internal IT solutions a bit look like mini SaaS because we don't have to worry about managing the underlying IT infrastructure. It's always up. And if no workload runs due to a holiday or an off time, we're not paying. It's the closest thing to a SaaS experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. We actually talk at AWS about abstraction services. So some of my services sit on top of our other AWS services. We have 175 plus services that you can pick from. But we want to be able to abstract your business users away from the technical complexity. And at the same time, we do want to give you that flexibility. And so things like Service Catalog integrated with your Lambda functions do let your cloud engineering team provision resources out. We work with all the SaaS vendors to integrate into a set of APIs so that we can give you a secure identity management model that you can run across your organization. And we've even recently done things like integrate Service Catalog with vendors like ServiceNow or other vendors that other customers may choose, because each customer has their own service management framework to minimize the operation burden that we put on your scientists, your researchers, the people who are creating the shareholder value for BMS. So I think we working very closely with you there. If we think about where you want to take the digital transformation next of Bristol Myers Squibb, and with all the great progress you've already accomplished, let's kind of go from where you've been, because now you're very much cloud first, you're a heavy user of AWS, you've abstracted away the complexity, you're automating your scientists. What's next on the Paul von Autenried vision of where you want to go?
You know, Dave, when I think about all forms of cloud computing, again, infrastructure, platform, software as a service, our world today is characterized by a lot of clouds. And so if you'll allow me to use the metaphor of real clouds, I'm pretty sure that when clouds collide, they create thunder and lightning. So probably high on my wish list, viewing this world through that lens, would be a greater methods of frictionless integration across clouds. But another thought that comes to mind is that so much of what we've talked about is the role of technology enabling new and faster ways of our company operating. But frankly, in my mind, we can and we should expect that advanced technology combined with great therapeutics in science are going to actually change the way patients experience and access medicines. But third, and probably most important on my wish list for the next 3 years is that all of these great technology things that we're doing is actually going to result in fundamental breakthroughs in science, in medical science, so that patients are able to prevail in their fight against serious diseases.
I love the focus on the patient. Speaking as a human being, ultimately we all have a persona of being a patient, so we want Bristol Myers Squibb to continue to do the tremendous innovation that you've accomplished. I think your comment on clouds and lightning, to use that term, clearly I think you see AWS doing a lot of work on identity federation, both with things like our SSO, our partnerships with companies like OneLogin and Okta. So when you have applications coming from multiple SaaS vendors, we're working with thousands of SaaS vendors. And in fact, last year I set up a healthcare marketplace where we're working with dozens of healthcare software vendors. And we clearly want to be able to bring you the best selection of software as a service and allow you to easily configure it and control it and govern it in the BMS well-governed management framework that you have. So I really want to thank you for the innovation that you've accomplished with us. Frankly, we learn from you. Your Cloud Center of Excellence team have been great contributors to, frankly, improving one of my services, Service Catalog. And we really want to continue to work with you and help you solve those patient challenges all around the world. Paul, thank you.
Dave, thanks very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to tell the story of our digital journey. It's very exciting, the things we're doing at BMS and the impact it's having on healthcare. Thanks.
Thank you. What a great talk with Paul from Bristol Myers Squibb, and a lot of lessons there that I think customers on this talk will be very interested to want to accomplish. Paul moved out of a data center at speed, stood up the largest SAP instance that we believe we have running on AWS globally, and is clearly pleased that in moving to a serverless-based application development methodology is innovating faster for the benefit of Bristol Myers Squibb patients and customers, and is also accomplishing governance by provisioning out infrastructure and applications in a service management framework heavily centered around Service Catalog, CloudFormation, and integration with other third-party tools. Very much the kind of thing that we're recommending that any customer should be doing as you transform, migrate, and govern your application portfolio. Paul also worked with several consulting partners in that journey, and still today is using several major consulting partners who are AWS partners. And so the last pillar that I want to talk about on our talk today is the importance of working with a partner. In studying over 1,000 migrations that we've seen done around the world, we've really observed that where customers involve a partner, there are multiple benefits. The journey and modernization of your application portfolio is also some culture change and organizational change. And involving an external partner, you're not only bringing in external skills, perhaps to tackle one part of the project, but you're also very often bringing in a consulting partner that can engage with you on the educational and cultural changes that you probably want to bring to your own IT staff. And so as we look at these different pillars, we've seen that companies that really want to drive new business outcomes engage the partner in different parts of the project. In some cases, they're bringing in an Accenture or a Deloitte or a Slalom to actually modernize a particular application, where a large global integrator may have deep expertise in modernizing a consumer application, in modernizing and rewriting a supply chain application, or something to do with data science and data analytics. On the other hand, some customers want to point a partner at the operating model, at the infrastructure operations cost. And as Sallie Mae used AWS managed services, so you might see other customers like Aon turn to somebody like Rackspace Onica to take over the operational cost of a piece of the infrastructure, freeing up staff to focus on development and innovation. We've actually also got a set of customers that want to bring in domain expertise over security and networking. And so in some cases, we would see customers contracting with people like a Presidio in North America, an Optiv or a Computer Center in EMEA to bring in domain such over networking with Cisco or over identity with Okta. So we very much encourage and observe that where customers use multiple consulting partners, perhaps in different parts of the problem set, migrations can go 25% faster, and in some cases, they have better business outcomes and greater cost savings. And it also brings in skills from those partners to train your own staff, because your staff are going to be upskilling and capturing new skills. Now, you may want to use partners in different parts of the world. And so we also work hard to certify partners. And I'm pleased to say that we now have over 130 partners in the APN network that are certified migration competency partners. This is up over 50% from the end of 2019. And we're actually observing migrations going on right now in 42 countries around the world where partners are engaged, all the way from the large global integrators down to local experts in a given country. And we continue to add those partners, and we help them get trained on particular domain areas that they can bring to accelerate your migration. Now, AWS Professional Services has also built out skills, and our common pattern is that we work with a partner. So very often we'll find we're engaged at a client where it's AWS Professional Services working in conjunction with one or multiple partners that you have already got that you prefer, or that we'll introduce as a trusted partner. And we're seeing that pattern play out around the world. And you may engage AWS ourselves on particular domains. The first area is very much around training and certification. And we have a broad array of training and certification services for you to upskill your teams in particular domain areas that you want your teams to become expert. You may actually ask us to come in and bring in AWS managed services, as was done at Sallie Mae, or as another customer will be talking in a minute, Thomson Reuters. And managed services teams will take over control of some part of your infrastructure. You might actually want to use us to project manage the migration itself, but not the application modernization. Or you'll prefer to just exclusively work with one of our partners. Now, interestingly, we've also put professional services into Marketplace, as I mentioned earlier today, and I'm pleased to say that there are over 100 professional services listings now in Marketplace, very much associated with the implementation of software, where you can contract for services right out of Marketplace. And just over a year ago, we launched a service called AWS IQ, where you're going to find task-based contractors that will do small projects very quickly over a particular domain area. And of course, we continue to expand our AWS support, with our premium offer being AWS Enterprise Support. And we have thousands of large entities around the world contracting for AWS Enterprise Support. These are all mechanisms to augment the skills of your staff and to help your staff get up to speed so that you become autonomous, but contract out to us when we help you modernize and transform faster. Let's talk about Thomson Reuters. Thomson Reuters, a major information provider around the world. Justin Wright is a guy that I've been working with for several years. He's the VP of Cloud Operations. working in a very large Thomson Reuters fleet where they're already migrating hundreds of applications and over 12,000 servers onto AWS. They've refreshed their security posture. They've worked closely with one of our top partners, Trend Micro, and where they've contracted in AWS managed services to manage a number of those applications, freeing up the Thomson Reuters team to concentrate on the innovation of other applications that they want to deliver and the delivery of their information services out to their thousands of customers around the world. And Justin continues to look at ways to optimize his supply chain and his use of various service providers in order to innovate on behalf of his customers at Thomson Reuters. This is a good example of a large global information provider modernizing their application portfolio on AWS. So in summary, taking you across the idea of an application portfolio, the idea that you want to have a very efficient and cost-efficient operating model, and the idea that you only accomplish it really effectively using professional services providers, let's think about three things I'd love you to walk away with. Number one is prioritize the applications that you are going to transform and differentiate your company. Out of your portfolio, what would we observe is that there may be 5 or 10 applications, either in customer experience or in supply chain or in research or in engineering, that really differentiate you as a company. Or in government, it could be over taxpayer experience and a particular service being given to the consumer. Secondly, set up an operating model, a service management framework that will really allow you to yield cost efficiency and increase levels of automation on how you manage your distributed teams, your distributed services, and so we can put in that right level of observability and automation to reduce labor costs and increase efficiency and resiliency of everything that is running at your company. And finally, pick the best partner to augment your skills, teach your people, and to take on some attribute of your project to compress the time in both migration and modernization so that you sooner realize cost savings as you migrate your portfolio to the AWS cloud. Those are the key learnings we'd give you from studying over 1,000 migrations and on executing migrations with thousands of companies around the world. I hope you found this very useful. And I'd like to finish by just pointing out that in the next few days, there are going to be multiple sessions where I think you'll find additional follow-on knowledge. These are just some of those sessions on this slide. And I encourage you to do follow-ups and also to reach out to the appropriate AWS teams that can follow up on this talk. Thank you.